The sirens at St. Jude's ER were nothing compared to the deafening roar of a U.S. Navy Seahawk touching down on the staff helipad. When heavily armed special operators stormed the pristine lobby, demanding specialist Hale, the hospital bullies realized the quiet nurse they'd been torturing wasn't who she seemed. St. Jude's Memorial Hospital in downtown Seattle was renowned for two things: its state-of-the-art Level 1 trauma center and its absolutely vicious staff hierarchy. The emergency department operated less like a place of healing and more like a high school cafeteria, populated by Type A personalities with medical degrees. At the top of this food chain sat Jessica Caldwell, the formidable charge nurse who ruled the floor with an iron fist and a razor-sharp tongue, and Dr. Gregory Thomas, an attending physician whose surgical skills were matched only by his towering arrogance. If you weren't in their inner circle, you were a target, and nobody had a bigger target on her back than the newest transfer, River Hale. River was 28, with pale skin, tired eyes, and mousy brown hair constantly tied up in a severe, messy bun. She wore standard-issue baggy scrubs that completely swallowed her frame, and she walked with a quiet, almost ghost-like silence. When she first arrived on the floor, she didn't offer a dramatic backstory, didn't try to charm Dr. Thomas with flirtatious banter, and didn't kiss the ring of Jessica Caldwell. She simply clocked in, kept her head down, and did exactly what she was told. To the apex predators of St. Jude's, this quiet compliance was blood in the water. "Did you see her during the pile-up on I-5 yesterday?" Jess sneered one Tuesday afternoon in the break room, stirring her iced coffee. She was speaking to a small audience of junior nurses. "I told the new girl to prep Trauma Bay 4, and she just stood there like a deer in the headlights. I swear, if someone's sneeze is too hard, Hale looks like she's going to need a paper bag to breathe into." Dr. Thomas chuckled from the corner, not looking up from his tablet. "She's a wallflower, Jess. Probably transferred from some cushy suburban clinic where the biggest emergency was a kid with a bead stuck up his nose. Keep her on bedpans and IV placements. I don't want her anywhere near my critical patients." "Oh, don't worry, doctor. I got her on fluids and feces duty." Jess laughed maliciously. Outside the break room, sorting through a disorganized cart of medical supplies, River heard every word. Her expression didn't change. She didn't flush with embarrassment, nor did she storm in to defend herself. She simply picked up a bundle of saline flushes, her fingers moving with a mechanical, practiced efficiency, and walked away. Over the next 3 weeks, the bullying escalated from passive-aggressive comments to blatant sabotage. Jess consistently assigned River the most grueling, thankless tasks. When a belligerent drunk patient vomited across the waiting room, it was River who was handed the mop. When a combative psych patient needed a catheter, River was sent in alone. Jess frequently misplaced River's charting, forcing the quiet nurse to stay hours past the end of her 12-hour shift to rewrite her notes. Throughout it all, River remained a frustrating enigma. She never complained. She never cried. She just absorbed the abuse with a blank, almost vacant stare that unnerved Jess more than she cared to admit. There was only one person on the floor who didn't treat River like a pariah. Phoenix Miller, a senior trauma nurse with a kind heart and a sharp eye, began to notice small inconsistencies in the timid wallflower narrative. One evening, Phoenix walked into the supply closet to find River organizing intubation kits. "Hey, River," he said gently, leaning against the doorframe. "You know you don't have to stay late to do this. A night shift can restock." "I don't mind," River replied softly, not looking up. "Keeps my hands busy." Phoenix hesitated. "Listen, about Jess, she can be a nightmare. Don't let her get to you. She's just threatened because you're new and you don't play her games." River finally paused, turning a pair of heavy-duty trauma shears over in her hands. "I dealt with worse than Jessica Caldwell, Phoenix." Her words don't carry any weight. It was the way she said it that made the hair on Phoenix's arms stand up. There was no tremor in her voice, no defensive posture. It was stated as a cold, absolute fact as she reached up to place a box on the top shelf. The sleeve of her scrub top slid down, revealing a jagged, pink scar wrapping around her forearm. The kind of scar that didn't come from a minor kitchen accident. It looks like a blast burn. Before Phoenix could ask about it, River swiftly pulled her sleeve down, offered a polite, closed-lip smile, and slipped past him into the chaotic hallway. Phoenix went to the nurse's station and logged into the hospital's internal directory. He typed in River Hale. The screen loaded, displaying her employee profile. But where there should have been a list of previous hospital affiliations, education history, and certifications, there was almost nothing. Just her name, her active RN license number, and a cryptic note under her previous employment. Recalled redacted Department of Defense clearance required. Phoenix frowned, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his eyes. Department of Defense? Now by month 2, the tension insane. Jude's emergency department was palpable. Winter had hit Seattle hard, bringing endless rain, ice, and a massive influx of multi-vehicle collisions. The staff was overworked, exhausted, and on edge. Jess's treatment of River had grown increasingly cruel, using the quiet nurse as a scapegoat for any logistical failure on the floor. Hale, Jess barked across the crowded nurse's station on a particularly brutal Friday night. I told you to push the dilaudid in bed 20 minutes ago. What is wrong with you? Are you deaf or just incompetent? River was currently holding pressure on a deep laceration for a frightened teenager in bed 2. The patient in bed 6 is exhibiting signs of respiratory depression. Jess, River replied evenly, not raising her voice. His oxygen saturation dropped to 88%. Pushing dilaudid right now would require intubation within 5 minutes. I notified Dr. Thomas. Jess turned a dark shade of red. Several nurses looked away, pretending to read charts. To be corrected publicly by the floor's punching bag was a massive blow to Jess's ego. You don't make the call on medications, Hale. You are a nurse. You follow orders. If Dr. Thomas prescribed it, you push it. Actually, Jess, Dr. Thomas said, strolling up to the desk with a scowl. Hale is right. I just checked the chart. Good catch, I suppose. He didn't look at River, brushing off the near-fatal medical error as if it were a typo. He turned his glare onto Jess. But next time, communicate better. Jess shot River a look of pure, unadulterated venom. 30 minutes later, the trauma phone rang. The distinct piercing tones signaled a level 1 incoming. Phoenix answered it, his face going pale as he listened to the paramedics. Listen up. Phoenix shouted over the din of the ER. We have a John Doe, approximately 30 years old. Industrial accident at the shipyard. Patient was pinned between a crane and a steel beam. Massive crush injury to the chest and abdomen. BP is 70 over palpatory, heart rate 140. He's circling the drain. ETA is 2 minutes. Dr. Datzer there. Thomas immediately sprang into action. Trauma Bay 1. Jess, I need the massive transfusion protocol initiated. Get me 2 large-bore IVs, ultrasound for a fast exam, and set up a chest tube tray. Hale, he pointed a finger at River. Stay out of the way. Stand in the corner and run blood down from the bank. Do not touch the patient. Understood, River said, her voice a flat monotone. The double doors smashed open. Paramedics rushed in, straddling a gurney while performing CPR. The patient was a mess of torn flannel and blood. His chest was horribly bruised, the right side caved in. They transferred him to the trauma bed on the count of 3. Chaos erupted. Monitors shrieked as they were attached, displaying a dangerously erratic heart rhythm. I can't get a vein, Jess yelled, her hands slick with blood as she dug with an IV needle into the man's battered arm. His veins had totally collapsed. Dr. Thomas, airway is filling with blood. A respiratory therapist shouted. I can't intubate. I can't see the cords. Dr. Thomas was standing at the side of the bed, the ultrasound probe in his hand, but his eyes were wide. The pressure of the situation, the sheer volume of blood, and the rapid deterioration of the patient were causing him to freeze. We need an IO. Drill into his tibia and get suction. Doctor, he's in PEA arrest. Pulseless electrical activity. Phoenix shouted, watching the monitor. He's lost too much blood. His right lung isn't just collapsed, there's a massive tension pneumothorax shifting his heart. Chest tube, hand me the scalpel. Doctor, Thomas demanded, his voice cracking. He grabbed the blade with a trembling hand, aiming for the side of the man's chest. But in his panic, his angle was completely wrong. He was about to cut directly into the liver. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on Dr. Taunter's, Thomas's wrist with the force of a steel vice. The entire room froze for a fraction of a second. Dr. Thomas looked up, stunned. It was River. Her posture had completely transformed. The slouch was gone. Her eyes, usually cast downward, were now burning with an intense, terrifying focus. "You are too low, Doctor," River said. Her voice was no longer quiet. It was a commanding baritone bark that cut through the alarms like a knife. "You will hit the hepatic vein and kill him instantly. Now, Before Thomas could process the insubordination, River physically shoved him a step back. She didn't wait for permission. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, she snatched a massive 14-gauge needle from the tray. She didn't hesitate or measure. She palpated the man's collarbone, found a second intercostal space, and slammed the needle directly into his chest. A loud hiss of escaping trapped air filled the room, followed immediately by a geyser of dark blood. "Phoenix, grab the drill, right tibial plateau. Give me intraosseous access now," River commanded, her hands already moving to the next task. "Jess, hang 2 units of O-negative on the rapid infuser. Stop digging in his arm." Everyone, shocked into submission by the sheer authority in her voice, obeyed instantly. Airway still compromised. The respiratory therapist panicked. River grabbed the scalpel from the tray where Thomas had dropped it. "Crithiatrobotomy," she announced clinically. She tilted the patient's head back, made a precise vertical incision over his throat, and smoothly inserted a breathing tube directly into the trachea. "Bag him." Within 60 seconds, the monitor's terrifying alarm shifted to a steady rhythmic beep. The patient's blood pressure began to climb. The color slowly returned to the monitor's readings. He was stabilized. The trauma bay was dead silent, save for the mechanical breathing of the ventilator. Dr. Thomas stood against the wall, his mouth slightly open, staring at his hands. Jess was clutching a blood bag, staring at River as if a ghost had just possessed the timid nurse. River took a step back from the bed. She peeled off her bloody gloves, tossing them precisely into the biohazard bin. As quickly as the commanding aura had appeared, it vanished. Her shoulders slumped. She lowered her eyes, wiped a streak of blood from her cheek with the back of her wrist, and turned to Dr. Dronta. "Thomas, my apologies, Doctor," she murmured softly, her voice returning to its usual timid whisper. "I shouldn't have stepped in. I'll go check on the blood bank." Without waiting for a response, she slipped out the glass doors and disappeared down the hall. 10 minutes later, the patient was wheeled up to surgery. Jess cornered Dr. Thomas in the hallway. "Are you going to report her?" she hissed, her jealousy and embarrassment masking her relief that the patient survived. "She assaulted you. She shoved an attending physician and performed a surgical procedure without a license. She could have killed him." "Doctor?" Thomas, pale and sweating, swallowed hard. "If she hadn't done that, Jess, I would have killed him. Her placement was... it was flawless. I've never seen anyone move like that under pressure. Not even in fellowship." "I don't care." Jess spat. "She's a liability. I'm taking this to Brenda in administration. Hale is done." Meanwhile, Phoenix was cleaning up Trauma Bay 1. He picked up the heavy trauma Shears River had left behind in the rush. He turned them over in his hands. He took out his penlight and clicked it on, shining it closely on the black titanium pivot point of the scissors. There, etched microscopically into the metal, was a tiny emblem. An eagle, clutching an anchor, a trident, and a flintlock pistol. Phoenix's breath caught in his throat. It was the emblem of the United States Naval Special Warfare Command. He looked toward the empty hallway where River had disappeared. "Who the hell are you, River?" he whispered to the empty room. The weather outside worsened, the rain turning into sleet as a freak supercell storm settled directly over the Pacific Northwest. Power grids across the city were beginning to flicker. The real storm inside St. Jude's, however, was just about to break. By 3 a.m., the Seattle storm had escalated from a severe weather advisory to a full-blown historic event. Winds howled off Puget Sound, rattling the reinforced glass of St. Jude's emergency department. The power grid had already blinked twice, plunging the hospital into terrifying momentary darkness before the massive diesel backup generators violently kicked in. But inside the administrative wing on the 4th floor, a different kind of storm was brewing. Brenda Higgins, the vice president of hospital operations, sat behind her massive mahogany desk. Brenda was a woman who cared infinitely more about liability insurance and PR optics than patient survival rates. Flanking her were Dr. Gregory Thomas, looking deeply uncomfortable but resolute in his self-preservation, and Jessica Caldwell, whose face held a triumphant, vindictive smirk. Standing in the center of the room, still wearing scrubs faintly stained with the John Doe's blood, was River Hale. "Let me be absolutely clear, Miss Hale," Brenda said, her voice dripping with corporate condescension, adjusting her reading glasses. "What you performed tonight was an egregious violation of hospital protocol, the Nursing Practice Act, and state law. You assaulted a senior attending physician and performed an unauthorized invasive surgical procedure. A cricothyrotomy is a life-saving measure when the airway is occluded and the patient is in extremis," River replied. Her voice was back to its quiet, flat baseline. She stood perfectly still, her hands clasped loosely behind her back in a parade rest posture that only Phoenix Miller had been observant enough to recognize. Dr. Thomas was aiming his scalpel at the hepatic vein. If I had not intervened, the patient would have bled out on the table in under 30 seconds. "That is a matter of opinion," Jess snapped, stepping forward. "You are a floor nurse, Hale. You don't have the training to make that call. You got lucky, and your luck opened this hospital up to a multi-million-dollar malpractice lawsuit. Is the patient alive, Dr. Thomas?" River asked softly, shifting her gaze to the surgeon. Thomas swallowed hard, refusing to meet her eyes. "He is currently stable in the ICU, but that doesn't excuse your insubordination. You bypassed the chain of command." "The chain of command was paralyzed by panic," River stated factually, without an ounce of malice. "It wasn't an insult, it was an after-action report." Brenda slammed her hand on the desk. "Enough. Your arrogance is astounding. We pulled your file, Hale, or rather we tried to. It is highly irregular for a nurse to have a heavily redacted employment history. HR flagged it weeks ago, but we assumed it was a clerical error from your out-of-state transfer. Now I see it's because you are a rogue operator who clearly couldn't cut it wherever you came from." River didn't flinch. She simply stared at Brenda with eyes that looked 1,000 miles away. "As of this moment, your employment at St. Jude is terminated," Brenda declared, pulling a manila folder from her drawer. "Security will escort you to your locker. Furthermore, the hospital's legal department is currently contacting the Seattle police. We will be pressing charges for assault and practicing medicine without a medical license. You aren't just losing your job, Hale. You are going to prison." The heavy oak door to the office suddenly burst open. Phoenix Miller stood in the doorway, breathing heavily, still holding a portable radio. "Phoenix, what is the meaning of this?" Brenda barked. "We are in the middle of a confidential termination." "Brenda, you need to turn on the news," Phoenix said, his voice tight with panic. He didn't look at Jess or Dr. Thomas. His eyes were fixed on River. The I-90 bridge just had a massive structural failure due to the wind shear. A transit bus and 6 cars went over the side. We have a mass casualty incident inbound. 30+ criticals. We need every hand on deck right now. We are handling a severe internal breach of protocol, Jess retorted, crossing her arms. Hale is terminated. She's not touching another patient. Jess, are you out of your mind? Phoenix yelled, losing his professional composure. We have people drowning and bleeding out. We don't have the staff. And quite frankly, he pointed a shaking finger at River. She's the best damn trauma operator in this building. She's a liability, Brenda yelled back. Security is on their way up. I wouldn't advise that. A voice echoed from the hallway. Everyone turned. Standing behind Phoenix was a man in a soaking wet trench coat, holding a leather badge wallet open. The gold shield inside gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Detective Miller, Seattle PD. We received a call from hospital administration regarding an assault. Jess beamed. Yes, officer. Right here. River Hale. Arrest her. The detective walked into the room, his eyes scanning the occupants before landing on River. He looked at her face, then at a small digital photograph on his phone. His expression shifted from authoritative to deeply confused. Ma'am, is your name River Hale? The detective asked. It is, River said. I need you to step away from the desk, the detective ordered, reaching for his handcuffs. Detective, River said, her voice lowering an octave, carrying that same terrifying authority it had in the trauma bay. I highly recommend you make a phone call to the Department of Defense Liaison Office at Joint Base Lewis McChord before you put those cuffs on me. Tell them you are detaining Echo 7. Brenda let out a harsh, mocking laugh. Echo 7? What is this, a spy movie? You are a fired nurse, Hale. Cuff her, detective. The detective hesitated. He had been on the force a long time, and he knew the look of a cornered criminal. This woman didn't look cornered. She looked like she was humoring them. Before he could make a decision, the hospital's lights flickered again, died completely, and the emergency red lighting bathed the office in a sinister, bloody glow. Then they heard it. It started as a low thrumming, a vibration in the chest that shook the coffee mugs on Brenda's desk. The sound rapidly amplified into a deafening rhythmic roar that drowned out the howling wind. It wasn't the high-pitched whine of the hospital's standard medevac chopper. This was a heavy, deep, muscular sound. What is that? Doctor? Thomas asked, stepping back from the window. Phoenix looked out the glass. The storm was raging, but cutting through the sleet and darkness were 2 blinding searchlights descending directly onto the hospital's reinforced staff helipad. That's not our flight care chopper. It's too big. Through the rain-streaked window, they watched as a massive, matte black U.S. Navy MH-60S Seahawk touched down. The rotors whipped the standing water on the roof into a violent hurricane. Even before the wheels fully settled, the side doors slid open. 4 men leapt onto the helipad. They weren't paramedics. They were clad in dripping wet, state-of-the-art precision tactical gear, wearing panoramic night vision goggles flipped up on their ballistic helmets, and carrying suppressed HK-416 assault rifles tied to their chests. They moved with a synchronized, terrifying efficiency, immediately stacking up on the rooftop access door that led directly down to the 4th floor. What is happening? Brenda shrieked, backing away from the window. Call security. Security can't stop them, Brenda, Phoenix said quietly, his eyes wide. Seconds later, the stairwell door down the hall from the office was blown open with a resounding crash. Heavy boots thundered against the linoleum. The presence of the heavily armed men instantly sucked all the air out of the administrative wing. The Seattle PD detective instinctively reached for his sidearm but froze when 2 red laser dots instantly painted his chest. Seattle PD, secure your weapon and step back. Now, a deep voice commanded from the hallway. A 5th man stepped into the doorway of Brenda's office. He was massive, his tactical vest plastered with communication cables and a radio. On his shoulder was a subdued American flag patch and the gold squadron insignia of Naval Special Warfare Development Group SEAL Team 6. He lowered his rifle, his eyes sweeping the room, ignoring the terrified administrators and the frozen detective. His gaze locked onto the small, mousy woman in the oversized scrubs. "Specialist Hale," the giant man said. River didn't look surprised, she didn't look relieved. She just looked tired. "Commander Hayes, you're making a scene." "Sorry to blow your cover, Specialist," Commander Hayes replied, a grim smile playing on his lips. "But your mandatory psychiatric leave is officially cancelled. We have a situation. A CIA extraction team in the Caspian Sea went south. 3 operators down. Massive trauma. They're holding a secure compound, but they won't survive a standard exfil. The brass needs the best field surgeon they have, and they need her an hour ago." "Oh, Anna Bates," Jess let out a sputtering, choked sound. "Surgeon? Field surgeon?" "She's a nurse. She cleans bedpans." Commander Hayes slowly turned his head to look at Jess. The look in his eyes was so profoundly cold it made her take a physical step back. "Ma'am, this nurse is Chief Petty Officer River Hale, an independent duty corpsman attached to Tier 1 Special Operations. She has more confirmed field surgeries and a heavy enemy fire than most trauma attendings will see in 2 lifetimes. She's currently on a Dodu-mandated undercover sabbatical to recover from an IED blast that took out half her team in Syria." Dr. Thomas's jaw literally dropped. The blood drained entirely from his face as he remembered the grip she had on his wrist, the absolute, flawless precision of her scalpel cut. She wasn't a wallflower. She was a weapon. River reached up and pulled the messy bun loose. Her brown hair cascaded down her shoulders. She reached under the collar of her baggy scrub top and pulled out a set of black titanium dog tags, letting them rest over the cheap fabric. The timid, hunched posture vanished entirely. She stood straight, rolling her shoulders, her eyes hardening into steel. She walked over to Brenda's desk and picked up the termination folder. She tore it in half, then dropped the pieces onto the mahogany wood. "I guess I don't need 2 weeks' notice," River said. She turned to walk toward the door, but paused, looking back at Jessica Caldwell. Jess was trembling, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish, unable to process the absolute shattering of her reality. "Jessica," River said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "the next time a new transfer comes to your floor, remember that you have no idea what war they just walked out of. Check your ego. It's going to kill a patient one day." River then looked at Phoenix. For the first time in 2 months, she offered a genuine warm smile. "The black shears in Trauma Bay won. Keep them, Phoenix. You're a good nurse." Without another word, she walked out of the office, falling perfectly into formation with the 4 heavily armed SEALs. Commander Hayes gave the room one last dismissive look before following her. The administrators and the detectives stood frozen in the red emergency lighting, listening to the tactical boots retreat up the stairwell. A minute later, the deafening roar of the Seahawk's engines pitched upward. The helicopter lifted off the roof, banking hard into the violent Seattle storm, taking the quiet nurse back to the war she had never truly left. Down in the ER, the trauma doors blasted open as the first wave of casualties from the bridge collapse rolled in. Dr. Thomas and Jess were paged overhead, over and over again. But up in the 4th floor office, they remained rooted to the spot, entirely broken by the realization that they had just mocked, bullied, and tried to destroy a woman who spent her life walking through hell. Did you see that twist coming? Sometimes the quietest people in the room carry the heaviest armor. If you loved this intense story of karma and hidden identities, hit that like button right now. Share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying mic drop moment. And don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling, real-life drama stories every single week. What should our next story be? Comment below.